Hello, seventh graders. Welcome to week 4 of online school. For this week's assignment, you should have a copy of this. You can print it out. That would make it easiest. It is 4 pages, so make sure you have all 4 pages all together here. If you don't have a printer, that's okay. You can do like what I had you guys do before, and you can simply just write the answers to the questions that are on the handout on a piece of notebook paper. So if you have this with you, great. If not, just follow along. So yes, I understand it's 4 pages, but hey, I'm not making you read and annotate this week. I'm just making you watch a video, and you can use the video to answer the questions in the handout. All right, so we are diving into the Mexican-American War. You finished the last section of the chapter where it talked about how Texas was finally annexed to the United States. They wrote their own state constitution. They copied a lot of the U.S. Constitution, and they modeled their government after the United States government. So they had 3 branches of government: the executive branch, which, you know, the United States, the executive branch is the president and the vice president. They carry out the laws. But in the state government, you have the governor and the lieutenant governor. And then we have the legislative branch, which is made up of the House and the Senate, just like in the U.S. government. And then the judicial branch. Oh, I'm sorry, the legislative branch, they make the laws. So the legislative makes the laws, the executive branch carries out the laws, and then the judicial branch, think of the word judge, they actually interpret the laws and apply them in the courts. So we talked about how the first governor of Texas was James Pinckney, and then, and so now it is a state. Now, pretty soon after Texas was annexed to the United States, we come to the Mexican-American War. And so the first question that I ask you in the handout are, what were the 2 major causes of the Mexican-American War? The first major cause, obviously, is the annexation of Texas. So, Texas annexation. And the, first, let's break that one down. So Texas was annexed to the United States. It became the 28th state of the United States. Remember that Texas gained its independence from Mexico in 1836. And immediately under Sam Houston, he really pushed for annexation to the United States pretty soon after they won their independence. And so he didn't want Texas to be the Lone Star State for however long. He didn't want Texas to be all by itself. They did want to separate from Mexico, but most Texans actually wanted to be part of the United States. They wanted the more established government to help them with all the problems that they were dealing with. And most of the colonists that were living in Texas at the time, most Texans were from the United States. So he was really pushing for Texas annexation, but they did not achieve it because the United States was not ready to deal with the question of slavery right away. So Texas was still a slave state. So Texas, still a slave state. Even though slavery was outlawed under Mexican law, a lot of the U.S. colonists had brought slaves with them into Texas, and they continued slavery in Texas. And so now that they're independent, they still have slavery in Texas, and so Texas would be coming into the United States as a slave state, and there was already some disagreement, some tension within the United States over the question of slavery, so they didn't want to throw in Texas into that mix because it was a slave state. And so Texas remained independent for the next 10 years. And so Texas independent from 1836, when they won their independence, to 1845. The second cause of the Mexican-American War was manifest destiny. And this was an idea that came up in about 1845, and this was an idea that was held by most Americans at the time, where they really believed that America was destined to expand its land all the way from the Pacific Ocean westward to, all the way from the Atlantic Ocean in the east to the Pacific Ocean in the west. And so they really believed that it was their destiny to get all of the land out west. And so after Texas was annexed to the United States really pushed, well, at least the president at that time, really wanted to get California from Mexico as well. And so the U.S. president at that time, the U.S. president was James Polk. And so he became president in 1845. And he ran on this platform of being pro-annexation of Texas, and he also ran on the platform of manifest destiny, and won the election. And by winning the election, he really confirmed that this is what most Americans wanted as well. So he desperately wanted to get California from Mexico, and of course Mexico was not willing to give up California. They were very offended by this offer, much in the same way that they were offended when John Quincy Adams, so many years earlier, tried to buy Texas from Mexico. So this is the idea that America was destined by God to expand westward all the way to the Pacific coast. Now, on the second page of your handout, you'll see that there's this painting here called American Progress, and it's painted by John Gast in 1872, so after the fact, but this painting was all about manifest destiny and all of the ideas and the ideals that the Americans at that time had. And so what I want you to notice is the woman in the middle of in the forefront of the painting, she is actually called Columbia, and that was the name given to America at that time. And she's the personified symbol of America moving across the land. And as you notice, she's moving from the east to the west. And notice that in front of her in the west is darkness. And then as she moves across, light follows her. And so what I want you to do is look for other symbols within the painting. What are other things that you see? What is she holding? What is trailing behind her? Look in the background and in the front, and what is in the dark part of the west, and then what is in the light part that is following her. And tell me what you think this means, and what did the Americans really believe at that time as they were expanding westward. And so as you examine the painting and look for the symbols, I want you to write down what symbols you see, and then just tell me in your own words, what do you think it means? What's the significance? Why do you think these things were put in the painting? Okay, another reason why the whole manifest destiny and Texas annexation led to the Mexican-American War is because there were disputes over where the border of Texas, or the border between Texas and Mexico, actually was. Now, the United States claimed that Texas's westernmost border was at the Rio Grande. So here's the Rio Grande, which starts way up here, but then, as you can see, it covers the southwesternmost part of Texas's border as we know it today. And so the U.S. held that that was the border between Texas and Mexico. And the reason they said that is because in 1836, when Texas won their independence from Mexico, they signed in the public and the private treaties of Velasco that Santa Anna also signed, was that the border between Texas and Mexico would be at the Rio Grande. So that's what the United States believed to be true, because that's what Texas said was true. Now, Mexico, on the other hand, said that Texas's border didn't go that far west. They said that Texas's westernmost border stopped at the Nueces River. So right here. So they said if Texas is annexed to the U.S., then the U.S. had all of the land that was northeast of the Nueces River. And everything that was southwest of that river, they claimed still belonged to Mexico. And the reason for this is because they did not accept the treaties of Velasco, because they said that Santa Anna was pressured to sign in exchange for his life, and so therefore they never accepted the public or the private treaties of Velasco. And so this whole territory between the Nueces River and the Rio Grande was disputed. So this is the disputed territory. Okay? Now, so what happened is that when Texas was annexed to the United States, Mexico still believed and claimed that Texas belonged to Mexico, and so they were wanting, and this was one of the things that the people who were anti-annexation feared, is a war with Mexico. And so Mexico was saying that this was still their land, and so James Polk sent Zachary Taylor, who was a general at that time, sent him down to the border, to the Rio Grande, and he took troops with him, but he stayed on what he believed to be the U.S. side of the Rio Grande. So he came down to about here. Well, then Mexico believed that this was their land, because remember, they didn't recognize that this belonged to Texas or the United States. So Mexico still claimed all of this land as theirs, but the United States said, oh, no, it's ours. And so when Zachary Taylor took United States troops here, there were shots fired. Now, who fired them first is a cause for debate, but there were shots fired and people were killed on both sides. Well, the United States said that American blood was shed on American soil. But Mexico said, no, you invaded our territory, and so we're just defending our territory. Well, the United States, because of this, they declared war with Mexico. And so this is what started the Mexican-American War. We are now on the 4th page of the handout, which brings us to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which was signed in 1848, which essentially ended the war. So the war lasted from 1846 to 1848. The United States won this war, and a lot of people argue that it was a very unfair war, because there was no way that the Mexican army could have, even had a chance against the much larger, more powerful forces of the United States. So it was not a fair war. So the war ended, and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So here's what the United States got out of the deal. So here's what the U.S. got, and here's what Mexico got. So the United States received over 1 million square miles of land. So Mexico ceded its land to the United States. So Mexico ceded, or gave over, more than 1 million square miles. And this was larger than the Louisiana Purchase. So if you remember anything about the Louisiana Purchase from 1803, that was a huge chunk of land that more than doubled the United States at that time. And now they're getting more than 1 million square miles of land to the west. And this is the northern chunk of Mexico, which has now been chopped off and handed over to the United States. This is bigger than the Louisiana Purchase, and it was about a third of Mexico's total land at that time that they gave over. So this includes Texas, well, modern day Texas, Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. In exchange, the United States gave Mexico $15 million. That was not a lot of money for that amount of land. They also agreed to pay any debts that Mexico owed to Texas. So the United States assumed all of those debts and paid them for Mexico so that Mexico would not have to. So U.S. paid debts. Okay, just so you can visualize just how much land Mexico lost and how much land the United States got. See, this was all of Mexico at that time. And then Texas was annexed to the United States. And then this whole chunk up here, all of this land up here, was what Mexico ceded to the United States. And if we go to this page, you'll see what it looks like here. So Texas was all of this land going up to here, but then the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo said that that Texas's border would be made here, so the shape that it is in now, and then all of this land, this was New Mexico territory. These states were not established yet, but as you can see, it was a big chunk of Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, a bit of Wyoming, Arizona, Nevada, and California. So a lot of times when people think about U.S. history or even Texas history, they don't think about the Mexican-American War. People think about the Revolutionary War. They think about the Alamo, Texas Revolutionary War, but they'll think about the Civil War, the big world wars. But the Mexican-American War just seems like a little blip on the radar screen. And yet the Mexican-American War actually had far-reaching effects for the United States history. So as we already know, the big result of the Mexican-American War was that the United States got a lot more land. They fulfilled their manifest destiny. So the U.S. got lots more land out west. Okay? This actually did a lot to create tensions within the United States because remember, initially, the United States did not want to annex Texas because Texas was a slave state. And they didn't want to create an imbalance of power between the southern slave states and the northern free states. And so now Texas is annexed, and now all of this new territory, including California and Arizona and all these states that we talked about before, they've been added on. They haven't become states yet, but all of this new territory is added on. And so now the question arises, will it be free territory or will they be slaveholding territory? And of course, the northern free states were arguing that that slavery should be banned from these new territories. But then the southern states argued, oh no, we want to be able to expand our economy, which included slavery at that time. And so this gaining all of this land actually created even more tensions. The tensions were really growing now between the northern free states and the southern slave states. So this increased tensions between northern free states and southern slave states over the question of how this new territory that was gained by the United States, how was it going to be used? Was slavery going to be abolished, or was it going to be allowed? And this actually led to the rise of the new Republican Party with Abraham Lincoln at that time. And all of this blew up into the Civil War. So we can draw a line from the Mexican-American War directly to the Civil War. So this war and what came out of it led to the Civil War.